Hey guys, my name is Ben Crawshaw and I'm Director of Content at the Rocket Company. And I've been preaching and communicating since 1998 and was communicating for a long time before I really felt like I was improving. And part of the problem for me when I look back at my communication was that, number one, there would be times when I would try to be like somebody else. And then there would be times when I would try to not be like anybody else. But all the while, I had all of this insecurity and fear when it came to my communication and did not know what to do with it. So what we want to do today is we want to talk about some real practical tools when it comes to evaluating your communication style. But really the goal is to help move us towards more clarity and confidence than fear and insecurity. Because here's what I discovered is that the weight of life change does not fall on my shoulders as a communicator. That I am not the person who's responsible for helping people grow, for helping people change. On the other hand, what I've also discovered is that there is a lot that I can learn from other communicators, from other teachers, pastors, and coaches. So I want to be myself. I want to be who God uniquely created me to be as a communicator, but I want to continually learn and grow from other people so that I can be more effective in my preparation and delivery as a communicator. And that's why I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Jeff Henderson. Jeff Henderson is the pastor of Gwinnett Church. He's the founder of Preaching Rocket and has spent 20 plus years helping communicators in the church space, pastors, traveling communicators, and even people in the business space, and has so much to offer and has had so much to offer me personally when it comes to getting better as a communicator, but also when it comes to embracing my unique voice and how God has uniquely wired me as a communicator. So I'm so excited for what he has to talk to you about because again, it combines these practical things that you can implement immediately with this sense of resting, knowing that the weight of what happens doesn't fall squarely on your shoulders. And then I'll be back up in a minute with some exciting things to talk to you about after Jeff shares with you.
Well, like Ben, I'm a preacher's kid, and my name's Jeff Henderson, and it's amazing that Ben and I are still in ministry. Some of you are preacher's kids, and isn't it amazing that we're still in this? And like Ben, I grew up watching my dad preach, and I can remember one of my first memories as growing up as a kid is just realizing, even at a young age, that something was happening in the room. And I would later realize that what was happening was my Heavenly Father was taking words that he was giving my earthly father and blessing the people in that church. And ever since then, I've just been fascinated with this gift that you've been given, that we've been given, of being able to stand up and say words, and that through the power of God and his love for people and how he uses these words, that God changes lives through what we do. And so we're so excited that you're part of Preaching Rocket and part of this learning session. And one of the things we want to do is just help preachers. We talk about the lonely preacher at Preaching Rocket, that you're by yourself and there's, maybe you're at a coffee shop or at your study or your kitchen table, and then you get up by yourself and you're preaching there by yourself. Then you get feedback, and that can feel lonely. And so we want to kind of come alongside of you. And one of the things we've said for years now is that we kind of want to be a staff to you. You don't even have to pay our insurance, though. You don't have to pay our benefits. We want to kind of help you in your ministry. And one of the ways we want to do this is when we want to help, and here's our promise at Preaching Rocket. First of all, we want to give you your Saturdays back, and we want to give you back to your family on Saturdays. And so we teach about preparation and process and all of that. The other promise is that we want to help make your next sermon your best sermon. Help make your next sermon your best sermon. And so that's what this whole system in coaching has been about. And so as Ben said, I've been doing this for a long time now, and it's my honor to be able to coach you and to coach other pastors and communicators, because what you're doing is so important. Now, what we believe about you is that God's thumbprints are on you. And if you stand up to speak, that there was some kind of thumbprint, some kind of passion in you that causes you to communicate to people. And in the pace of ministry, though, especially if you're preaching on a consistent basis, you've experienced this, that Sunday has the propensity to come every 7 days. Or if you're a youth pastor, there's sometimes this grind of I got to prepare, I got to prepare, I got to prepare. And sometimes in church world, what happens is because of the pace of ministry, we start skimping on preparation, and we sometimes preach other sermons and all that, and that may be fine. That's for another session. But what we think happens when we do that is we think your congregation is robbed of your voice and your life and the things that God has done in your life. And so one of the things we're very passionate about is helping you not only prepare, but helping you find your voice. And when you find your unique voice based on your unique relationship with Jesus and your unique background and all the things that have gone on in your life, we think that's a really powerful thing when your unique voice combines with the voice of your Heavenly Father. But it's not very helpful just to say you just need to find your voice. How do you find your voice? What does that look like? Well, for over 20 years now, I've been coaching communicators, and I've figured this out, that I think that there might be primarily 4 voices. And you have a strength in one of these voices, but each of these voices, they actually have a weakness. And once you know your particular voice and can lean into the strength, and then you also avoid the weakness, it helps you make your next sermon your best sermon and help you grow as a communicator and help you find your voice. So what we want to do in this session is we want to just unpack what these 4 voices are. And as we do this, share with you the strength of each, the weakness of each, and what you can do to leverage these voices. Now, you may see these 4 voices and you think, I might have a combination of these, which you might, which you probably do. But there's probably one that will rise to the surface. So what I want to do is just list these 4 voices and then go through the strength, the corresponding weakness, and the thing that you need to avoid, or the question you need to ask as you prepare for your next sermon. So here are the 4 voices. The voices are the voice of the teacher, the voice of the motivator, the voice of the storyteller, and the voice of the visionary, okay? There's the teacher, motivator, visionary, and storyteller. So let me go through the first one. The first one is teacher. And if you've got the voice of the teacher, here's your strength. The strength is content. And you love the content, which is absolutely fantastic, by the way. So you're so passionate about your content. Now, particularly in academic settings, we see this happen all the time, right? We get into a classroom setting and the professor lectures for an hour. And you know, that's one thing. And they're very passionate about that. And typically, a teacher has really strong content, okay? And that's great. Teacher plus strong content is great. But oftentimes, the teacher is so passionate or so well informed about the content that they make a critical mistake. And you've experienced this if you've been in a setting where a teacher makes this critical mistake. You've been in a setting where the teacher knows his or her content really, really well. They're passionate about it, but they've made a critical mistake. They've assumed that you know the same information like they do, and they've assumed that you're as passionate about this as they are. And that's a gigantic mistake in the voice of the teacher. So while the strength of the teacher, of the voice of the teacher is content, the weakness of the voice of the teacher, the weakness is connection. They don't connect. So what happens is in this moment is in the first 5 or 10 minutes, they can get up and just plow right into their content. But as they do that, they've not connected to why this is important. So for teachers, the most important thing that you've got to understand is, why is this important? Assume that your audience couldn't care less about what you're about to say. If you can then combine your content with a very powerful why, especially in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it leans your audience into what you have to say. So the question you need to ask yourself, as if you have the voice of the teacher, is, why is this content important? Why is this content important? And I know you already know why it's important, but you kind of have to melt your brain away for just a second, wipe it all away, and go, if I was communicating to this for the very first time to someone who doesn't know this content, how do I communicate to them in the first 5 or 10 minutes that they need to listen to me? In fact, for preachers, we want people in the first 5 or 10 minutes of your sermon to go, oh, I'm so glad I came today. Oh, I'm so glad I came today. This is going to be so helpful. I've always wondered that. So if you've got great content, what you've got to do is assume the worst. You've got to assume that they couldn't care less about what you're about to say. But when you do the hard work of connecting the why to your strong content, that's a way to leverage the voice of the teacher and the strength of your content and avoid the weakness of not connecting, especially in the first part of your message. Okay, so that's the voice of the teacher. The second voice we're going to talk about is the voice of the motivator, the voice of the motivator. And it's interesting, the voice of the motivator and the voice of the teacher are actually a little bit opposite. And not a little bit opposite, a lot opposite. Here's what the voice, the strength of the voice of the motivator is. The strength of the motivator is connection. They connect with the crowd. So you've seen this before. This might be you. You're up there and you instantly, you've got energy. There's that charisma that you bring. There's connection with the audience and you instantly feel it. And that's a gift, by the way. Just like strong content is a gift for those who have the voice of the teacher, connecting with a crowd in the first 5 or 10 minutes, that's a gift from God as well. But there's a weakness to this, okay? And the weakness of the voice of the motivator is actually content, all right? And I've seen this happen a lot. You've got men or women who are fantastically gifted in the first 5 or 10 minutes and they can engage, but at some point you can tell that they haven't done the work in terms of leveraging and leaning in to the content. So the strength of the motivator is connection. The weakness of the motivator is the content. And so what you have to ask yourself if you've got the voice of the motivator is the what is most important. All right. So here's the question I want you to ask if you've got the voice of the motivator. The question is this: what do I want my audience or my congregation to do? What do I want them to do? So you've engaged them, you've gotten their attention, that's awesome. But the middle part of the message is when this what really begins to surface. What do you want them to do? It's not enough to entertain them. It's not enough to connect with them, although that's really important. And there's nothing wrong with entertaining them, by the way. Laughter is one of the most overlooked assets of a sermon. The more that you can get people laughing, especially early on, the better you're able to connect with your audience. But if you've got the voice of the motivator, you've got to say, this is what I want you to do. So one of the things that we teach the people who have the voice of the motivator is near the end of the message to say something like this. So having said all of that, here's what I want you to do. And then there's your sermon right there. And if you can put it in a short phrase, even better. In fact, one of the things we teach at Preaching Rocket is how to create memorable, portable bottom lines. That's for another time together. But if you have the voice of the motivator and you can answer this question, what do I want you to do? And you combine that with your natural gifting of being able to connect and engage with your congregation, your church, youth group, whatever, that's a powerful combination. So that's a way that you leverage the strength of the voice of the motivator, but you avoid the weakness of the voice of the motivator as well. All right, so let's keep moving on. We had the voice of the teacher, we had the voice of the motivator, and now we have the voice of the storyteller. And the strength of the storyteller is engaging the audience. You're engaging the audience. You can tell this story. You can go from this story to this story. You've just got this gift. And as you tell the story, what happens is it's if the crowd feels like you're just talking to them. This is a fantastic gift. And you see this play out throughout history. Obviously, Jesus, the greatest preacher who ever lived, he was a fantastic storyteller. Abraham Lincoln, a fantastic storyteller. In fact, he would tell stories all the time, all right? So you've got this gift of storytelling. That's awesome. And you can engage the audience, all right? The challenge, though, and I saw this a lot in the business world, we would bring in the person who won the Super Bowl, or they won, this great athletic event, and they would get up for a while and then they would tell stories, which was great. You were really fascinated. Hey, that guy won the Super Bowl. Hey, that guy won this. Hey, that guy was president or whatever. But then as they told stories, they just began to ramble a little bit. And here's the challenge with storyteller, all right? You've got the strength to engage the audience, but the weakness is you've got to let them know, where are we going with all these stories, all right? You've got to be able to have a direction. So if you're telling story after story, which you're really good at, the audience seems engaged, but there's no purposeful direction, you're going to lose your audience at some point, all right? So what you've got to do as a storyteller is you've got to understand that the where is most important. In other words, you could say this, and I've coached storytellers to do this, that you just pause and say, hey, I'm about to tell you a story. The reason I'm going to tell you a story is it's going to lead us somewhere where I want us to go today. So this story has a purpose. Now, by just saying that statement, you're asking your congregation, your audience to follow you. In essence, what you're saying is, Hey, I'm about to tell you a story, but will you go with me? Because we're about to go on a little journey together, okay? We're going to go on a journey together, and this story is going to lead us there. So the question you've got to ask yourself as you tell these stories is, where am I taking the audience? Where is the destination that I'm going? And you could tell story after story, and they can connect all together, and that's fine. But as long as you're saying, here's a direction, the audience will follow you. One of the greatest questions I got as I was working with a storyteller, I was working with their team, and this guy was a great storyteller, but one of his team members said, hey, I trust you because I know you. And as you're up there telling these stories, I know that ultimately there's going to be a purpose. But you're speaking to people who don't know you, and not that they don't trust you, but they don't really know where you're going. And if you don't tell them that this story has a purpose, they can disengage from you and disengage from the talk. But as long as you simply say, as we've been saying, hey, this story has a purpose, I'm taking you somewhere, follow along with me, this story is going to lead us to a purpose. That's a way to combine your natural gifting as a storyteller to avoid the weakness of the storyteller and have a purpose in the stories that you tell. So that's the voice of the teacher, the voice of the motivator, and the voice of the storyteller. The final voice is the voice of the visionary, the voice of the visionary. And the voice of the visionary is fantastic. And the strength of the voice of the visionary is purpose, all right? You have a purpose, all right? You want to change the world. You want to change the community. You've got big dreams. You have a problem that you know needs to be solved, and you know that the people around you are the ones that need to help you solve it. That's fantastic. So if you've got the voice of the visionary and you've got this gifting from God that you want to change the world, change the community, change the school, change the neighborhood, change the world, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you've got purpose, and purpose is so powerful. You've got a very strong why. And if you don't know what your why is, you will ultimately at some point lose your way. So you're so good at telling your church, your community, here's why we're here and here's what we're about to do, okay? So that's a very strong strength, having that voice as the visionary. But the weakness is this. The weakness of the visionary is how. You've got a very strong why, but the weakness can be a how. And so the question that we have to ask is, how are we going to do this? How is really important for the voice of the visionary? And the question again is, how are we going to do this? Now, here's the deal. If you're going to go change the world, solve this massive problem, I'm not suggesting that you have to have it all, planned out and mapped out. But what I am suggesting is that you need to have a step or two that you can show your church, here's our problem, here's why we're going to solve it, and here's how we're going to solve it, at least our first few steps together. And let me give you an example. So behind me, you can't see this, we're actually filming this at a church, Gwinnett Church. Behind me, we're filming a big student building. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because in our particular county, in this particular state of Georgia, 8 of the 10 largest high schools in our entire state are actually in our county. 8 of the largest 10 high schools in the entire state of Georgia are in our county. Well, that's something that's really significant to us. And so that's an opportunity to reach more and more high school students in our community. So that's a big why for us. And so that's easy for me to stand up and to preach on that. But then I've got to say, how are we going to do this? And the how, this building connects directly to trying to reach more students in our community. My point is this: if you've got the gifting of the voice of the visionary, that's awesome. You've got a strong why. You've just got to make sure that you can give your church some tangible next steps for how. Because if you don't do that, and if you leave how on the table and you keep inspiring your congregation, at some point it becomes rhetoric. At some point they think, yeah, he's just talking, but nothing's ever really going to change. So how is really, really important for the voice of the visionary. So let me recap this real quick. You have the voice of the teacher. The teacher has strong content, but you got to make sure you connect. The voice of the motivator, you connect really, really strong, but if you don't have strong content, you'll lose them, especially in the middle part of your message. The storyteller, you engage your audience, but you got to have a clear direction. And with the visionary, you've got a strong why, but you need to articulate how. All right? Now, here's the other thing, and then I'll bring Ben back up. Not only are there voices, There are also environments that have a particular voice as well, all right? What I mean by that is there are teaching environments, there are motivating environments, there are storytelling environments, and there are visionary environments, okay? And it's really helpful when you're going in to speak into an environment, especially if you're a guest communicator and you travel around a good bit. One of the best questions you need to ask the person who's booking you or inviting you to come speak is, what kind of environment is this? Is it a teaching environment? Am I supposed to motivate somebody? Do you want me to still tell stories about how this organization is impacting the world? Or is this a visionary environment? Is this for example, is this a fundraising environment, okay? Now, if you're a teacher and you're going into a motivating environment, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go into that. But what that means is that you're gonna have to tailor your voice to tailor into and move into that motivating environment. Or if you're a motivator and you move into a teaching environment, you've got to make sure that you bring stronger content. Let me give you an example and then I'll close. I have the voice of a motivator. And so when I'm invited into teaching environments, what I'm often told is, hey, we're going to give you more time, and so you're going to have more opportunity to bring more content. So what I've got to make sure is I can get up and engage the crowd, but I got to make sure that I'm really prepared and planned out in terms of my content, because I know as a motivator, I'm not going into a motivating environment. I'm going into a teaching environment. So if you can know those two things, what your voice is and the environment that you're going into, oh, it's such a huge gift. And here's what we're excited about. We're excited that for many of you, this is the first time you've ever heard anything like this. And here's the great thing about it. You can now take this information and apply it to the next time you speak. And that's really what we want to do at Preaching Rocket. We want to help make your next sermon or your next talk or your next message, we want to make it your best message. And then the next one, we want to make that one your best message. And so this pressure that you've got to be this outstanding, fantastic communicator, we just want to take that off your shoulders. Instead, we want to give you a more realistic goal. I want to give me a more realistic goal. I'm preaching this upcoming Sunday, okay? I just want to make this next message my best message. Evaluate it, and then go on and make my next message my best message. And that's why we created Preaching Rocket. We wanted to help you because many of you, you're kind of by yourself. And so we don't want you to be by yourself. Many of you, you're working on your sermons on Saturday. We want to give Saturday back to you, and we want to give you back to your family on Saturday. So you don't have to go this alone. And so what we do at Preaching Rocket is talk about things like we've just talked about. You have a voice. You have a strength to that voice. You also have a weakness. We talk about how to get 5 days ahead, 3 weeks ahead. We talk about memorable, portable bottom lines. We talk about how to make sure that you receive feedback in a way that doesn't crush your spirit. Monday is the day that most pastors resign. And so we talk about that you don't have to listen to everybody, but you do have to listen to somebody. We actually teach you how to listen to feedback and how to receive and actually seek out proper evaluative feedback. And personally, I just want to thank those of you who've been with us on this journey for Preaching Rocket. And it's been so exciting to get, I'm so excited to get your feedback and to hear the feedback that your congregation is giving you. Now, many of you have been asking, okay, love it, but what's next? And so that's why we've launched Preaching Rocket Next. We're taking it to the next level, and Ben's going to talk more about that. So first of all, thanks for being a part of this journey. If you're new to Preaching Rocket, we want to invite you into the community. And if you've been around for these last few years, I'm so excited and grateful that you're here, but very excited that Ben's going to tell you what we think is next for you.
Well, I hope that content was as helpful for you as it was for me. So grateful for Jeff Henderson and the time he spends investing into communicators all over the place. So I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, is there an area where you feel like your preaching is stuck or in a rut, or you feel a little bit burnt out or a little bit tired of preparing and delivering sermons week after week? Question number 2 is, are there some communicators around you that you would love to develop? Some communicators that you would love to invest in and help them grow as pastors and teachers? And question number 3 is, would you like to expand your influence and platform? Do you feel like there's a unique message that God has placed on your heart based on your life circumstances or maybe the congregation or community you've been called to, and you would love to see that message go out to other churches and church leaders? Well, I'm excited to talk about Preaching Rocket next. Some of the stuff Jeff talked about today, it was so great. It just makes us want to talk more. There's so many things that we could talk about when it comes to our preaching. Even if we had all day, and you had all day to sit and watch video after video after video. But the truth is, we need more than just videos. We need interaction, community, training, accountability, resources, coaching. And that's why Preaching Rocket Next is such an exciting thing to talk about. Is it because it brings pastors together and church leaders and communicators together in a community where pastors help pastors get better at what they do. And there are tips. You have access to coaches, resources, sermon stories, giving talks. There's coaching calls, these small group coaching calls for members only, where you can get access to people who want to help you right now. And that's why I think Preaching Rocket Next is such an exciting opportunity, because it brings pastors together and communicators can help other communicators get better at what they do. You have some things that you're doing great right now, and there are other pastors and communicators who could learn from you. And that's the community of Preaching Rocket Next. You're going to get all kinds of pro tips and access to coaches and people who can help you, resources, sermon stories, giving talks, ebooks. But also, this is a place where we can come together on a monthly basis and learn from each other. That's Preaching Rocket Next. You jump in. If you jump in before my face goes away, we're going to throw in a couple of sermon preparation bonuses. The Pros Sermon Prep Playbook and Sermon Craft, both of which are going to practically help you get your sermon pieced together earlier in the week so you have more time for your family, staff, volunteers, working on your budget, recruitment, spending time with people in the community, dealing with tragedies, facilities, all of the things that you have to do as a pastor and church leader. So you jump in at preachingrocketnext.com and you'll see the website on this screen. And also there's a phone number if you want to call and ask some more questions. We're going to throw in 2 bonuses, all of which are going to help you with your sermon preparation, the Pros Sermon Prep Playbook and also Sermon Craft. Preaching Rocket Next is a community where pastors can come together, learn from each other, grow together, get access to coaches and resources, 24/7 access to all kinds of things that are going to help you grow to the next level, help you develop other communicators, and help you expand your influence and your platform. $39 a month. If you jump in today, you'll get these bonuses for free, and it's a humongous deal that makes an immediate impact for you. So you can click on the link that you see on the screen, or you can open up another tab on your computer and type in preachingrocketnext.com, and it will easily walk you through the system for signing up. Or you can call the phone number that you see on the screen if you want to ask more questions or you want to sign up over the phone. preachingrocketnext.com, $39 a month. I'm excited for you to see the immediate difference that a community and a training resource like this does for you, and not just your preaching, but your peace of mind. I'm excited to learn from you, and I'm really excited for you guys and girls to learn from each other in Preaching Rocket Next. preachingrocketnext.com. Thanks for taking time to watch this video. We appreciate all that you do.